2030, as announced by the Energy Minister Jeff Radebe on the Integrated Resource Plan. Coal power is the predominant energy source, with gas and wind as the next most important. There's no plan to extend the current contribution made by the nuclear industry, which, with cost rather, being cited as the main reason. Needless to say, the industry is not happy, nor is Labour. It's worried that the renewable sector will see some job losses. To discuss this, I'm now joined in studio by academic and engineer Dr. Anthonie Cilliers and NEHAWU's sector representative Mr. Zolani Masoleng. Thanks very much for joining us, gentlemen. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
All right, so the 26th of October, an important day in terms of this IRP and final comment, and I know that various players in the energy sector have been coming together to prepare a response. You're an academic, you've been watching this story unfold, and particularly from a nuclear perspective, and I just wonder, from what you're seeing and what you've read in the IRP, what might be missing in terms of the nuclear story in particular?
Yeah, look, the IRP 2018 draft is putting a lot of emphasis on this least cost analysis that they've been doing, and that is important. But what we see is, and when we look at that, we look at two specific things. The first one is how this least cost analysis is being applied, because the classic application, if you look at it internationally, is done in a cost-benefit analysis. So in the IRP 2018, we see that it is particularly looking at cost items, as if you're going out to buy a car or just a spent item, and not looking at where you're spending that money. With nuclear in particular, a lot of that spent is in the construction sector, in the civil construction, which is all money spent locally, and that is not being considered. So the overall cost-benefit analysis is not being done. It's simply looking at a particular area of cost, and a lot of what we see of the mix that we see coming in is items that's not sourced locally. It's items that will be imported from China, from Germany, and if we talk about the gas part of the mix, that's something that we don't have locally. The other part that we look at in particular is how accurate this cost is done, and we don't think the nuclear cost, because of its long lifetime, is being considered correctly in this IRP 2018 analysis.
Explain that long-term section a bit more for me. Are we saying that nuclear, because of its long-term nature, has a benefit versus
yes,
renewables?
Absolutely. A nuclear plant, the new nuclear plants today that's designed, it's designed for a lifetime of 60 years. That compares to the 20-year lifespan of the renewable sector and the gas and so on. So you would have to recapitalize, well, twice or three times the amount to pass the whole lifespan of the plant. It doesn't help when you do the analysis for nuclear cost, because anything over about 30 years just gets away and runs to zero over time. So the benefit of that long lifetime of the plant is not being seen, and we will definitely comment on that.
All right, and Mr. Masoleng, Labour's not happy with this IRP as it stands.
Yes, Peter, we are definitely not happy, and quite frankly, we are angered with this.
Why?
Particularly because it fails to take into account the socio-economic impact of the energy policy. And that socio-economic impact includes jobs, includes localization, and also making sure that there is an expansion of the industry. In terms of the jobs aspect of it, currently we are looking at both preserving the current jobs and also future jobs. The nuclear industry has operating 2 nuclear power plants at NEHAWU, which is producing the nuclear medicine, and is due to be decommissioned in 2035 somewhere there, or 2030, and also the nuclear power plant in Kuber. So without a new investment in the new nuclear infrastructure, it means one thing to us as the workers in that sector, that jobs will be lost, and they will be lost forever. So we cannot therefore accept that in a country that is facing very high levels of unemployment, inequality and poverty. If, for instance, that the government claim that it is concerned about job losses, it cannot preside over an energy mix that is going to facilitate the loss of jobs.
So the Public Enterprises Minister in 2017, it was Lynn Brown, she says that I think coal with some of the decommissioning of some of the coal plants, might lose 6,000 jobs. How many jobs are likely to be lost in the nuclear sector if none are built, if there's no expansion plans?
Look, we are looking at least direct jobs in terms of what is there now, anything around 4,000 or more, and also there is a value chain attached to the current nuclear industry. Those are also indirect jobs. So it's really thousands of jobs that will be lost.
Okay, let's call it 10,000. They say that the renewable sector may create as many as 250,000 jobs, which will be mainly found in the manufacturing sector rather than in construction and maintenance. So it looks like more jobs will be created if we go the renewables route than you're losing.
That's not true, because to start with, these renewables are imported from overseas. So if there will be jobs created, they will be created in Europe and in other countries where these solar panels are coming from and these wind turbines. And I think it will be good for the media to go to these renewable energy plant and see for yourselves which are these jobs are they talking about, where are these workers. So it can't be jobs on paper. The effect of the matter is that this is a privatization scheme that will see to it that the generation capacity of Eskom is being surrendered to private individuals who, in the main, most of them are overseas and maybe with their elite domestically. Privatization has always meant one thing to us as the workers: less jobs, less pay, and more work. So we really are happy that the representative of the renewable energy who was here on your show conceded to the loss of jobs in the coal sector and now in the nuclear industry. So until really we are presented with facts, not just figures that are not there, we reject that argument. We see this IRP as lacking in terms of being pro-poor and making sure that you address the unemployment in the country. With nuclear, we are confident that a lot of jobs can be created for young people who are in the various skills along the value chain. Yeah.
Dr. Cilliers, what's the ideal energy mix in your view?
Look, we've been talking about this quite a bit, and there's definitely space for all the energy components. And once we start looking at the socio-economic benefits of the industries that we have in the country, then we start looking at where we need to go. If you look at our load demand at the moment, about 60% of our demand never goes away. So it's what we call base load demand. So 60% will be your flat curve that you'll always require. So that could be contributed by nuclear, and as the coal plants are being decommissioned, as they get old, we replace them with nuclear power, and then the rest, that other third of the mix, will be a mix between the wind, solar, and gas to provide for the peaking supply. So that's quite important. I want to add as well, the jobs that's being sustained at the Koeberg nuclear power plant at the moment is in the order of about 36,000 permanent jobs annually. That's direct, indirect, and induced jobs, and that's for a fairly small plant. So that is important if we expand that. There's also the contribution to the GDP of the country. We see about 15 billion rand contribution annually to the Western Cape GDP, as well as about 13 billion additional contribution that the Koeberg plant that's running is making to the GDP in the country's GDP. So it's quite important to sustain this industry that we've built up. We've got one of the strongest nuclear industries in the world.
So clearly the people who are concerned, other issues, they say safety, storage of radioactive waste, and in a case of maybe a nuclear disaster, obvious health concerns. And this is things that they put up and say, look, this nuclear story is scary.
The nuclear story is scary, but I think we need to educate the public more. The nuclear industry, on record, is the safest industry, not only in the energy sector, but the safest industry in the world in terms of how it manages its impact. We know about the big events that's happened, and you can count them. There's about 3 in the world that has ever happened, and those are big, scary accidents. But none of those accidents, I can add, can happen to Koeberg today as it is operating. So our nuclear plants are run absolutely perfectly well. Then again, the storage of waste problem, the volume of waste that is produced by a nuclear power plant is less than the waste volume produced by any other energy source in the world. Even energy sources that don't use fuel and have no emissions. The volume of waste is just smaller. And every power plant in the world will produce dangerous waste. It's not only nuclear plants. We have all sorts of poisonous materials that we find in there. But it's very easy to maintain, it's very easy to keep, and everything that Koeberg has ever produced is on site at Koeberg and very well maintained. So the volumes are so small, it's easy and cheap to maintain.
Mr. Masoleng, I'll give you the last word. And, you know, to be fair, coal plants are going to be decommissioned at some point in time, and whether renewables come in or not. So that means jobs were always going to be lost. So is it fair to suggest that the introduction of renewables is contributing to the loss of jobs in plants, whether they're nuclear or coal, are going to be decommissioned at some point?
The issue, what must be clear, Peter, is that we are not opposed to an energy mix, but we are opposed to an energy mix that is excluding nuclear. So we have already said that renewables will be part of that, but it cannot be that they must be reintroduced into the system in such a reckless way that will lead to mass job losses in a country with so much high unemployment. So in other words, it must be systematic, it must be paced properly, so that the transition, it is just. But right now, it will never be just if it means that renewables must be imposed in these large quantities as they are, and that will lead to the loss of jobs in large scale in the coal sector and also in the nuclear industry. So we see here as something that will never even replace those jobs, even if they were to say that they will create jobs themselves. So it's not a case of us versus them. We see these nuclear sources as complementing one another, but their approach is that once we get into the grid, we need to do so by kicking out other energy sources. And this is what we are opposed to. We are saying, let us find a proper balance that takes into account the socio-economic impact of the country as a whole, including current jobs and future jobs. So we have never been totally opposed to renewable. We see their role, but it cannot be that they want to entrench themselves at the expense of the poor, the coal, and in the nuclear industry. That much we don't agree with.
Gentlemen, we run out of time, unfortunately. These things go by so quickly, but thanks very much indeed for giving us your insights on this day. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thanks very much.
All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have more for you on Your Story. Stay with us.